All right, is
Okay,
that
we're
working?
back.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
Awesome. Okay,
Keep,
we can start in a second.
Keep a sharp eye on anybody who tries to join. Then, Meg.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna let anyone in who isn't familiar looking.
Welcome to Dr. Aubrey Roberts.
Yay! Yay!
Yay!
Thank you for joining us.
No worries. It is an honor. So, I guess I'm going to entertain everyone with a little bit of prehistoric marine reptiles from the top of the world, which is, of course, my subject. Although this time it is not dinosaurs, but something that I find a lot more exciting.
Yay!
That's valid.
All right, are we ready to go?
Are we streaming, Henry?
Yes, we are.
All right,
Awesome.
let's do this.
Let's do this. Okay, so I am Aubrey Roberts. I am a postdoc at the Natural History Museum at the University of Oslo in Norway. And I am a specialist in marine reptiles. So let's see if I can get this working. There we go. So marine reptiles are, of course, not dinosaurs. I hope this is clear to everyone. If not, I think my fantastic diagram, which is a lot worse than the previous paleo art. So marine reptiles are, of course, they live in the sea or in freshwater, whereas dinosaurs lived on land. But marine reptiles are all different groups of reptiles. And we do have some that are alive today, like sea turtles, for example. Otherwise, there were many different groups that were alive during the time of the dinosaurs that are now extinct, such as ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, which I'll talk a lot about today. And we have things like mosasaurs, thalattosaurs, all sorts of weird marine reptiles that were sometimes around for only a short period of time. So we have, I work on ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. So ichthyosaurs are a group of, they basically look like a cross between a fat dolphin and a fish, but they are reptiles, and they were around between the sort of the early Triassic to the late Cretaceous period. And plesiosaurs, we have a long neck type and we have a short neck type, so the pliosauromorph type. These are around between the sort of late Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous. And I've got some beautiful artwork here from Esteban Hilson, who has done a lot of the artwork for our research. So these are all used with permission. So these are the groups that I work on, and all three of these sort of animals were globally distributed. So we have fossils of them from the Arctic, the Antarctic, all the different continents. So we have a pretty good idea of how they sort of spread around the world, and also we sort of how they evolved as well, because these animals were around for a really long period of time. I mean, their evolutionary history for both of these two groups is about 150 million years. So that's an extremely long period of time, and we have fossils throughout this period of time as well. So ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs evolved from land-living reptiles. We're not entirely sure what sort of animal they evolved from, so what sort of reptile group they came from, but we still know quite a lot about how their body gradually changed from a more sort of land-based animal to a more marine-based animal. So we have quite a lot of fossils that show us this. Most of these come from, of course, the Triassic period, which is one of the periods that I am really interested in and that I'm currently working on at the moment. So I work excavating fossils and describing fossils from the pretty much as far north as you can go. So to an island group called Svalbard, which is actually owned by Norway. It's between 74 and 81 degrees north, and it is pretty remote. It's basically, so the northernmost town there is called Longyearbyen, and that is, I think, the northernmost settlement in the world. So it's can get pretty cold though in the winter, but because of the Gulf Stream, it's actually quite nice and pleasant in the summer. A fantastic 10 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but yeah, it's pretty all right to be there in the summer. So I'm part of a group that has traveled up to Svalbard since, I think they've been going since 2004 to excavate Mesozoic marine reptiles, mainly from the Jurassic and the Triassic period. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project that I've been a part of since 2011, where we've excavated these giant Jurassic marine reptiles, but also I'll start off with talking about the Triassic marine reptiles, because here we're seeing like the early evolution of these animals, and it's a super interesting time period to work in. So Svalbard during the Triassic was along the northernmost border of Pangaea. So it's a pretty, like, there aren't that many other places around the world where we've got fossils from this time. So it shows quite an important part of the ecosystem in the Triassic period, which is obviously pretty important, because as a paleontologist, you want to have a global picture of the fossils and how it sort of all works. So the early Triassic fossil record is interesting because we have some very important events that just happened beforehand. So if we have a look at this graph, so this estimates the number of families present on the planet throughout time. And we can see that there are numerous sort of fluctuations in this graph indicating extinction and diversification events. And one of the most famous of these events is, of course, the KPG extinction, right? Where we have a sort of an asteroid that hit the Earth and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. However, there is a larger extinction, which I'm sure many of you guys are aware of, which is the M-Permian event. So the M-Permian mass extinction is the largest extinction that we have in the fossil record. And there have been estimates that there has been a loss of 90% of marine species, at least. It was less severe on land. And the mass extinctions that we have, they change the composition of fauna on our planet, so destroying whole ecosystems, but also giving opportunities for other groups to get a foothold and diversify. And this is what we can see in the early Triassic fossil record. And it helps us understand how the M-Permian resulted in the evolution of new Triassic marine communities, some of which we still have alive in our oceans today. But more importantly for me, the marine reptiles. So this is a photo of an ichthyosaur, and it's from the field on Svalbard. So this is actually a middle Triassic ichthyosaur. And you've got its head sort of, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in the middle, its skull, and then its vertebral column is curled up all around it. And as you can see from the sort of the bones, they are a stunning blue color. And this is from an actual mineral that forms on the surface of these bones called vivianite, which makes it incredibly easy to spot. As you can see, there isn't a lot of vegetation here. It's pretty, there's no grass or any sort of green stuff covering it. So having blue fossils in black shale makes it really easy to spot. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've collected quite a few early and middle Triassic marine reptiles, particularly ichthyosaurs, but we actually found a massive bone bed a few years ago, which we've completed excavation and preparation, and we've got like over 35,000 bones and teeth. So we've got a huge amount of material that I'm describing along with my colleagues, and we're always looking for students, master students in particular, to come and join us and help us describe some of this awesome material. So please let me know if you are interested.
Can I talk to you after the stream?
Yes, of course. And so we started to sort of reconstruct the ecosystem of these early Triassic beds in Svalbard. And we've got giant ichthyosaurs, we've got smaller ichthyosaurs, we've got all sorts of fish and sharks. I have no idea about fish, but we've got so many fossil fish specimens that it is just crazy. So any people that are interested in fish, please please let me know if you want to come and help, because we have no idea what we've got. We've also got like marine amphibians, so temnospondyls, which are a very interesting group. So we're just starting to reconstruct the ecosystem of this place, and it is shown to be a lot more diverse than we ever dreamed about, to be honest. It's a really, really interesting locality. So keep your eyes peeled for some cool research projects that will hopefully be put out soon. But one of the larger projects, and I think it is one of the largest Arctic excavation project, is the Jurassic field work that we completed on Svalbard. So that we had 8 field seasons on Svalbard between 2004 and 2012, where we excavated up to 60 specimens of marine reptiles. And all of these were from the late Jurassic period. So you can see from the picture, this is a mountain range, and this yellow sort of line, that represents the Jurassic sediments and all of our sort of camps along the way. And so we've basically scoured this mountainside for marine reptiles. And we have some amazing specimens which have been really cool and new to science. One of the most amazing localities, I think, is a place where we actually had camp for several years. It's probably one of the richest localities in the world because there are just so many marine reptiles eroding out of this mountainside that we've even found marine reptiles lying on top of each other. When we've excavated one, we found another one. These are just some of the specimens that we've excavated just from this mountainside, but there were plenty more that were eroding out as well. So I'm sure now there will probably be more specimens that are there. So we've got quite a few plesiosaurs, which are the red dots, and the green dots, which are ichthyosaurs. And probably one of the most sort of, I guess, famous finds from this locality was the so-called Predator X, which there is a really, I think, terrible History Channel documentary about. So we've discovered 2 different pliosaur specimens, which were really big. They were quite fragmentary, obviously, because we are working in an Arctic environment. We have a lot of 3s and 4, which means that a lot of the bones get broken up really bad. So quite a lot of the specimens that we have are pretty fragmented and poorly preserved. So we've got sort of 2 parts of this, or 2 different specimens of pliosaur, and we managed to sort of piece together part of the skeleton. So we've got a paddle, which is huge. It was estimated to be about 3 meters long, so a pretty big beastie, and we've got parts of the skull and a lot of vertebrae and etc. So this animal was definitely the top predator of these seas. But we've also found some beautiful ichthyosaurs. Now this is one that was described in 2012. Yes. This is Cryopterygius or /Endorosaurus, based on which sort of identification you're going for. It was described as Cryopterygius, but now it's been referred to the Russian ichthyosaur Endorosaurus. This is the most complete ichthyosaur that we have from the locality, where it has it's kind of suffered an interesting taphonomical I guess burial. So as you can see, its neck is kind of like twisted up. So this is one of the specimens where we thought when we were sort of describing it, that it might have had what we call a nosedive. So when it sort of died and settled on the sediment, it actually dived into the sediment head first and then sort of snapped its neck and sort of got bent round in that sort of manner. So a pretty beautiful specimen. And this is just to sort of show as an example. So this is a log over the section. So what the late Jurassic Cretaceous succession is called the Slotsmoe member. And we've got about 60 different specimens. We've got pretty much equal amounts of plesiosaurs as ichthyosaurs at this point. So they're all sort of spread out through the succession. And we have quite a decent, we think that it was about sort of 12 million years of sedimentation, but that is still being worked on. So I thought I would show some really cool Arctic fieldwork photos. So fieldwork in the Arctic is not always a walk in the park, right? We do go there the first 2 weeks in August. And during that time, it is meant to be the best weather, like not meant to have snow or anything, like not too much wind. It's meant to be pretty good. And of course, because we are in the Arctic Circle, we have 24 hours of daylight. So it's quite easy to work in. However, the weather up there is still really unpredictable. Remember, we spend 2 weeks out in the remoteness of the Arctic. We don't have phone signal and we sleep in tents. So it's quite remote. So it can turn like this overnight. It can get very, very snowy and very bad weather incredibly quickly, which has been quite a challenge the few years that I've been excavating there. So this is a picture of when we're trying to plaster up a specimen. So I'll go through some of our field techniques in a bit, but we do use the sort of standard field techniques, which a lot of dinosaur paleontologists will use in the States and so forth, but it is not the easiest place to work in the fact that plaster, as I'm sure quite a few of you might know, doesn't dry very well under these conditions. So it is a bit of a challenge, but it is also incredibly fun. However, because we are sort of on the mountain slopes, we do get a lot of fog. And this fog is incredibly dangerous, actually, because can you guys think of any sort of dangerous white things lurking in the Arctic?
You know, I had fog like that in Alaska during field camp, and we just kind of sat down and waited. But I assume you have more polar bears over there than we do. Yeah,
we have a lot of polar bears. And there's actually a lot more of them now, thank goodness, because they're obviously been protected up there since the 70s. So their population has been growing. And there are a lot of polar bears in the area, and quite a few of them have actually never sort of really encountered humans that much because there aren't that many people that live and work on Svalbard. So we have had a few encounters with polar bears while we've been working. One story in particular, which was my first field season on Svalbard, and I was kind of terrified because it's very different seeing a polar bear from a boat than seeing a polar bear when you're on foot. And we were up working on a mountainside, and we saw this polar bear walking along the coast. And we also noticed that there were some kayakers that were staying in a cabin right along the beach. And the kayaker had come out and was sort of having a wash in the river, and we could see this polar bear just walking towards this kayaker. And we were sort of just like trying to shout down to them, but we were too far away. But eventually the kayaker did see the polar bear and just sprinted back to the cabin. Everything was okay. The polar bear just sort of walks on, and it just continued doing its thing. But that was kind of a terrifying moment where you sort of can see an accident happening and you can't do that much about it. So that was pretty terrifying. I'm not sure if this video will work, but I'll give it a go. No, won't work. That's fine. So I thought I'd sort of show how we excavate the specimens by showing or sharing a story about one of the plesiosaurs we excavated, which was just described, which we nicknamed Brittany. We nickname all of the specimens that we work on because it's a lot easier to remember the nicknames than it is to remember the numbers, which in this case is PMO 224248. So yeah, a lot more easy to say Brittany. So Brittany is a plesiosaur, long-neck plesiosaur, that we excavated in 2012, so the last Jurassic field season. And when we found Brittany, this is what we found. So these like white areas are bone, where the sort of black mud is shale. So not the sort of easiest thing to spot, but you do, after you sort of walked around the mountainsides, you do sort of get your eyes peeled into noticing any color differences. And in this case, it was pretty white. So the first thing that we'll do when we sort of find a specimen is we will sort of brush around to try and work out how complete it is, how big it is, how far into the mountainside it goes. So this is one of my colleagues, Julie, who is sort of doing the initial brushing of the area. We'll also sort of go downslope and see if we can pick up any bits which have sort of fallen and eroded out of the mountain already. Because obviously these are sort of mountain slopes and the rock layers just erode out as they are. They aren't really slanted in any way. So we quite often will find bits of bone and then we'll just follow them up to the source itself. So this is the excavation site of Brittany. The sort of the grey jacket that you can see down there is the body. And Brittany was sort of going into the mountainside head first. So this was the last field season of the Jurassic fieldwork, and we really wanted to find a complete plesiosaur skull because we hadn't found that yet. We found bits, but they weren't great. So this was sort of our last hope, as it were. So we spent a lot of effort trying to excavate out this plesiosaur, and it took us about, I think, 8 days from start till finish. And we're only a group of, I think that year we were 12 people, so we were sort of spread out a little bit more between excavations, but we were at least sort of 5 or 6 people working on this for most of the time. And the holes that we dig are quite big, obviously. Like, I think Brittany, we excavated about, I don't know, maybe a ton or so of rock. And all of this rock is usually lifted either to the side or downwards because we actually have to once we've excavated out the specimen, we have to put all the rock back again. And this is part of the agreement that we have with the governor of Svalbard to try and limit our impact into the environment. Like any plants that are sort of over the specimen, we have to sort of dig up and remove to the side and then put them back exactly where they were. So this is all part of the process of trying to excavate stuff sustainably. We also have to wipe out all of our footprints, which once you've been in an area for 2 weeks, there's a lot of footprints to rake out of existence, because in these Arctic environments, these footprints can stay for sometimes even decades. So it's good to try and wipe out all traces. So once we sort of brushed around the specimen to work out how big it is, we can start sort of trying to work out what the different parts are. But we try not to brush the specimen down too far because these specimens are super fragile because they've been in permafrost. They're pretty fragmented and beaten up. So pretty much if you sneeze on them, you're going to lose some bone. So we try and keep them reasonably covered. And obviously, because we're in the middle of nowhere, we don't have like diggers or anything like that can help us do our excavation. However, chainsaws work really well in cutting permafrost. So we've used chainsaws, we've used pneumatic drills, and pickaxes and a farm tool, or a Norwegian farm tool, which is called a krafse, which doesn't actually have an English word that I have managed to find. It's kind of like, it's shaped sort of like a half moon blade with 2 spikes on each end, which is really good at sort of separating out the shale and pulling it away. The excavation of Brittany was mainly done in complete fog and bad weather, and it was very muddy. And it got to the point that it was so muddy that, I mean, we were in these suits and everything, so we were sort of reasonably dry, but just to get rid of the mud, because when you have wet mud on clothes, they don't dry very well. So we would just take our suits off and then just dunk them in the nearby stream to try and get rid of all of the the mud, and then the next day they'd be sort of like semi-dry, and we just put them on and start all over again. So it was quite a sort of muddy experience. And it was slightly sort of demotivating a lot of the time. People definitely struggled the most this year because of the poor weather conditions. This is actually clean water, but it's just so covered in mud that I didn't really care at that point. And the hole that we excavated to sort of take out Brittany was pretty sizable. I couldn't get out of it without help in the end. It was a fairly deep hole. And there you've got Patrick, Camilla, sitting down in the hole with some of our other team members as well. So we had a great field trip, even though it was muddy. So after we've excavated the specimen and sort of brushed down, the next sort of step that we do is we add wet toilet paper to the specimen. And this is to protect it from when we add the plaster on, because obviously you don't want to add plaster directly onto the specimen, because then you're just going to get all of the bones stuck in the plaster. And that's not something that you want. So wet toilet paper works really well in separating the specimen itself from the plaster. Then we'll sort of put quite a few different layers of plaster. We'll use something called burlap, which is basically just like a net of rope. And we'll add in some like bits of wood or some steel, and to try and sort of strengthen these, what we call plaster jackets. After we've got that sort of top layer on, we'll start digging underneath and sort of making a sort of a lip around. And what you're actually seeing here are people holding the plaster in place. Because we're in the Arctic, plaster doesn't dry very well. And so it actually has to be held in place for about 30 minutes or so before it's sort of safe enough to dry. So that's why people are sort of in awkward positions trying to like hold it up. And it's actually quite a nice job, because when plaster dries, it warms. So you actually get to warm your hands at the same time. And yeah, we can have some quite awkward positions that you're basically stuck there for half an hour, but it's pretty fun. So after we've done this and we sort of dug underneath it a bit, we'll use these giant chisels that we actually got custom made and hammer them underneath, lash ropes around them, and then we'll attach it to a long sort of rope, which the whole team will help pull. And the chisels themselves there are to help separate it from the rock underneath. Obviously, we're still in permafrost, so the jacket or the bones inside are actually still in frozen ground quite often. So they're fairly easy to separate from underneath. And then we'll all sort of pull, and the jacket itself will flip over. Quite often it ends up with most of the team falling over. And you sort of get this sort of interlocking chisels which help keep all the shale and all the bones inside. We've had a couple of accidents where the chisels haven't quite been able to meet in the middle, and we've had a bit of spillage out. However, these things happen. We've managed to, I think, out of 60 specimens, it's only happened twice, so not too bad.
Woohoo! There's Pat.
Yeah, Pat. Yeah, he's been on many of these trips up to the Arctic with us. And then we sort of shave off the top, get rid of some of the excess shale, and put in some more sort of iron or bits of metal to try and sort of make it reasonably stiff. Obviously, because we have to get these jackets out by helicopter, because there's no way we can carry them down to a boat, which is how we're transported out. We have to quite often separate these specimens, because a lot of these specimens are between like 4 and 6 meters of length, and in total they come over a ton. So we have to quite often separate parts of the specimen to make smaller jackets so that we can easily transport them out. So here you can see 2 of the team working on separating Brittany's neck into 2 jackets. and you can see they're sort of removing the vertebrae. Everything is drawn and labeled, of course, to try and make sure that these can be put back in the lab. So during the excavation of Brittany, we were following these neck vertebrae in one by one by one, and there's a lot of neck vertebrae. There's like 50 neck vertebrae. It's pretty insane for a long neck plesiosaur of that time. Not like an elasmosaur from the Cretaceous, but it's still quite a lot. And Pat was super excited because he was really like sure that we were going to find the skull, and he was super excited and kept us going. However, when we got to the end of the neck, there was no skull. There was nothing at the end of the neck, and we were all really demotivated after digging that huge hole. It's the last field season in the Jurassic, no skull. Pat, however, didn't want to give up. He was like, maybe it's here somewhere, we just haven't managed to see it. So everyone else had sort of left and gone to have dinner. He stayed up there and tried to find it, which he did. It had only drifted a few centimeters away from the vertebral column, the neck itself, and this is the skull. Not very easy to see. I have no idea how Pat managed to find it in the muddy pit that was that excavation site, but the snout is here and the back of the skull is here, and we were, of course, very happy at the end of that. So once we'd excavated the skull and sort of packed up, we had to, of course, cover this giant pit and fill in all of the shale again, which is probably the hardest sort of physical task I've ever done. Moving, obviously you're pretty exhausted from sort of shifting out all of this stone anyway, but then you've got to put it all back again. It was very tough. I'm down on the left-hand side, not looking my best at that time. Afterwards, the specimens were, of course, flown up to Longyearbyen, where they are then shipped down to the museum in Oslo. And this is the specimen itself. So this is Brittany. It was published earlier this year, called Ophthalmothule creostea. Try and say that many times in a row. It's not very easy. Which is the youngest plesiosaur that we have from this section. So whether it's in the Jurassic or Cretaceous, it's hard to say because this area is not very well defined. But we have quite a lot of the specimen itself, so it's a pretty cool beastie. This was taken during the lab, so this is the body of the specimen during preparation. You've got the paddles up on the left-hand side with the shoulder girdle, and then you have sort of the ribs and this gastral basket of all of these little gastralia that sort of make up the stomach. And we did find some interesting stomach content as well, so it was a pretty nice find. I don't think the video will work, but this is the skull itself. I'm not sure if... No, never mind. So anyway, this is the skull. What was kind of fun with this skull was that it CT scanned quite nicely. So we managed to work out a bit more about the brain case and sort of what was inside the skull, because obviously the specimen is super fragile and the skull is really small. So the animal itself was about 5.5 meters long. Its skull was, I think, 21 centimeters long. So really small head. So using the CT scanning, we managed to sort of segment out parts of the brain case and get an idea of what it actually looked like. And it was super useful to compare to other plesiosaurs that were around at this time. And this is just a sort of reconstruction of the specimen itself. Obviously, fun thing about this specimen is that it has really big eyes. As you can discuss all day about what these big eyes could have been used for, whether it was for hunting in the deep or because of the seasonality in the Arctic at that time. Although it wasn't up in the Arctic Circle, you still would have had quite large differences between winter and summer. So yeah, interesting, but kind of sort of hard to say anything else. This is the whole specimen laid out. As you can see, even though the neck is sort of separated by different jaws, really long neck. So it's a pretty impressive specimen for the Jurassic. And it has been, this was part of my PhD project, and it was super fun to be able to sort of follow the specimen from finding to excavation, preparation, and to description. So yeah. So just to sort of finish off, I guess, what happened to the marine reptiles, right? So ichthyosaurs, they died out about 90 million years ago, and mosasaurs sort of took over at the end of the Cretaceous. And during the end of the Cretaceous, obviously many of you guys know, we had a meteorite or asteroid that hit the planet at 66 million years ago, which caused a mass extinction, which wiped out all of the non-avian dinosaurs and pretty much anything that was over a certain size. Apart from like reptiles such as crocodiles and turtles, the marine reptiles, other marine reptiles didn't make it, unfortunately. So, if you guys are interested in learning more, we've written field blogs on National Geographic, and we have a Geology Today article, which is open access, along with all of our other papers that we've published. And we're always interested in looking for new master students. We're an open and accepting group, and we'll happily sort of change projects for individual interests or needs. That's absolutely fine. I would like to say that master's degrees in Norway are in English and are free of tuition. So it doesn't matter what nationality you are, it's always free to study in Norway. So please don't hesitate to contact me if you guys are interested in coming to
I've got
study
University
this.
of Oslo open right now.
Excellent. So yeah, no, please, seriously, we really need new students. We've got so many things that need to be worked on. Whether you want to work on Jurassic stuff or Triassic stuff, that is completely up to the individual students. So we're happy to adapt any projects. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys sort of enjoyed this really speedy presentation into Arctic fieldwork and marine reptiles from the far north and stuff like that, and just to sort of thank all of the volunteers and students working in our group, and also thank you very much for having me. It's been an honor to present on this platform, and I really hope people donate to this amazing charity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast. This has been extremely interesting. Do we have any questions from the audience, guys?
I know there's got to be questions. Come on, people.
Come on, people. Donate some money. Let's get some questions.
I do actually have one question. I know that you used toilet paper. Is there any particular reason that you use toilet paper over paper towels or another separator? Just because I found that when I'm prepping out something in toilet paper, it tends to get moldy easier and not hold things together quite as well. So I was just wondering if there was any particular reason you use that.
Yeah. So we've actually tried many different sort of separators. So we have tried kitchen towel. We have tried sort of the cheap toilet paper and the expensive multi-ply toilet paper. And what we find with the kitchen roll in particular is that it doesn't cling to the specimens well enough, because these are so fragile and broken up. You need something that sits really tightly onto the specimen, which is why we use toilet paper instead of kitchen towel. However, it has to be the high quality toilet paper. Usually in the field, we actually ourselves use the cheap toilet paper, and the good toilet paper goes to the specimens. It's because that holds together a lot better, and we found that it doesn't mold as much as the cheap toilet paper. Sometimes we still get a little bit of mold, but that's always when there's been lots of like plant roots and things near the specimen. There aren't that many plants in the Arctic or sort of basically any vegetation where we work. So I think that helps in not having a lot of mold issues.
Awesome, thank you. Would we be able to get you to go back to your last slide?
Sure.
I think someone was trying to get some contact information, and
yeah. So I mean,
missed
if you want to contact me, I should have added my Twitter handle on here, but it's maybe I can type it into the Twitch stream itself. I can do that, because then you can just DM me if you are interested. Let me see.
Indeed. another question. How do you store such fragile specimens once they're indoors?
So the specimens themselves, when they arrive back from the field, they actually have to stay inside sort of a drying room for about 6 months to get rid of all of the excess water. And then afterwards, once they're sort of opened and prepped, we have to store them in a climate-controlled facility that we have, because these specimens quite often suffer from pyrite. So basically they rust. So they have to be kept really dry. And I mean, they probably keep a lot better if we kept them in sort of vacuum bags and stuff like that, but we don't do that. We just keep an eye on the specimens and make sure that there isn't a lot of pyrite rock going on. But otherwise, they're just kept in a climate-controlled facility in like cupboards or on giant shelves if they're really big specimens. Any other questions?
And there's the one is research being done on extant Svalbard animals by the University of Oslo.
So actually there is a university centre on Svalbard called the UNIS, which does most of the research on the sort of modern animals. And also they do quite a lot of archaeology as well up there, on like the sort of whaling communities that used to live up there and etc. But most of that is actually done out of UNIS. However, UNIS isn't a university in its own right. It's sort of funded by all of the Norwegian universities. So unless you're planning on doing a PhD up there, you have to study at one of the Norwegian universities to sort of go up there, or be enrolled, as I should say, to go up there and work on projects. But I spent part of my undergrad up there and took a lot of the master courses, and they are amazing courses. It's all pretty much field-based, and they're great fun. Both biology and the geology courses were amazing. I would absolutely recommend it. There aren't any tuition fees on those either. So even if you're enrolled in like a sort of a British course, you can quite often take one of the summer courses, for example.
I see an awful lot of, or at least a couple of people expressing an interest, so I'm sure you're going to get a couple of new followers and messages later.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, I've certainly been kind of desperate to get back into school at this point, so maybe we'll see if you want a slightly non-traditional aged American.
That is absolutely fine. We are completely open and welcoming to people of all ages and nationalities. Doesn't matter.
Awesome. I think the one last question we can do, unless we get a donation question, hint, hint, people.
Yeah.
What marine reptile do you think deserves its own safari toy the most?
Ooh. I would have to say one of the weirdest Triassic marine reptiles, Omphalosaurus. Omphalosaurus is a really weird beastie with super huge crushing teeth. Don't even really know what it looks like. We've got loads of these from the Triassic of Svalbard, and we still have no idea what it is.
Why didn't we include that in Triassic Madness, guys?
Yeah.
Because you were doing a billion other things at the same time.
What could we have sacrificed to make room for it?
Well, I formally apologize to Omphalosaurus.
We would have included it if we knew what it looked like.
Yeah. I mean, there are some good guesses of what it looks like, but I mean, no one really knows.
Do we have any more questions?
Do we have any donation questions?
Come on, guys. Let's donate. I know it's the middle of the night.
Or really early Norway time.
Yeah.
Or the middle of the day, Australia time. An international community means international problems. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Aubrey, for joining us. It's been amazing.
No worries. It has been super fun. I'm looking forward to following the whole event. It's going to be great.
Yay! Yeah, we'll see how loopy me and Henry are this time tomorrow. Someone did ask if you still have the time. What do you eat when you're working in the Arctic?
Good question. So because we have polar bears and stuff, we can't do any cooking or anything like that. So we actually just use like freeze-dried food. So like the sort of army food, I guess, that we just boil out water and pour into a bag and eat it. We have a lot of hot sauces to sort of change the flavor, but it doesn't really help.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. You get used to it after a few years.
How long are you out at a time? I know that the Northern Alaskan season is only like 3 or 4 weeks, if that.
Yeah, we are only out for 2 weeks. We've tried 3 weeks, but we get too much snow in July or at the end of August if we extend it. So it's always the 2 first weeks of August. And we will be going out next year. We've got funding to go out then. So any students, of course, that are on the project are usually included on that. So yeah.
Time to go work on an application.
Oh my god.
Maybe once I'm actually awake.
Probably best.
Right.
It's a very simple application.
It's time for me to look into grad school, so I'll keep this in mind.
Please do.
Those of you who are interested in master's degrees in our audience, especially our Black viewers, this sounds like a great opportunity. Yeah.
For sure. No tuition. Yay!
Yay!
Yay, civilized countries.
It's cold, but you can bundle up. In hot places, there's only so many things you can take off.
This is true. I mean, at the moment it's 30 degrees in Oslo, so it's not that cold, but
fair enough.
Svalbard is. All right. Well, I guess I will stop sharing this. Let me.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you so much again.
No problem.
Yeah.
Oh no, we revealed the stream again. Oh well.
We're gonna have to change the password. It's
Yeah.
fine.
All right. So long, and good luck with the rest of the stream, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll be here for several days.
Fantastic. I look forward to tuning in. All right. Bye then.
Thank you so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.